Hey, everybody. Peace and blessings. Hope everyone is having a wonderful, wonderful day. It's me again, Tamara T. Bush, on here to provide clarity on consumer laws. So this week we're going over the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is 15 USC 1681. I am going to go ahead and share out this broadcast, and I hope you all will do the same to anyone that you think it, will benefit from this information. So let me go ahead and turn my ringer off. Make sure all that is on silent. And definitely share out this broadcast. Share, share, share. Share out this broadcast. All right. I think we're good to go. So we're going to pick up right where we left off yesterday in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And we're going to do a brief refresher of what we covered yesterday, just to remind you all of some key points. All right, so give me just a second. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hi, everyone. My day has been filled. It was a day of excitement, boy. It was a whole lot of things going on around my house today. A whole lot of things going on around my house. So I hope that you all had an equally exciting day today. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, so definitely drop a one in the chat if you are able to see and hear me, and let me know where you are joining from. Drop your city and state in the chat if you are watching me live or if you are watching the replay. So hoping that you all can see my screen. Let me just double check that we're not having any technical difficulties. I want to make sure that everyone can see and hear this, and you can definitely see my screen. All right, good deal. Okay, so you can see my screen. Okay, so yesterday we covered 15 USC 1681 C2, which is block of information resulting from identity theft. And so we read the subchapter, and I pointed out some of the things that is required in order for you to enforce your privacy with the CRAs. Now, on day one, we spoke about who are the CRAs, right? We spoke about the fact that Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian are not companies that are backed by the government. They are not bureaus, because bureau means federal. And one other thing that I wanted to point out that I failed to mention on the previous days is that there are hundreds of credit reporting agencies, right? There are hundreds, and they all are equally liable and responsible when it comes to protecting your privacy, right? There's no one credit or consumer reporting agency over the other. They're all equally responsible. It's just that some of these companies are bigger than some of the smaller companies, and you know, I usually call them the big three: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. They are the big three. They're the most popular ones, but there's virtually hundreds of CRAs out there that are buying and selling your information every single day. And so the big three actually rely on information from the smaller CRAs to furnish them with information about you. And so there's certain companies out there that have been collecting data on you, since you were 18 years old. One of the other popular consumer reporting agencies is LexisNexis. So anytime that you go and you apply for insurance, you apply for a rental property, there's certain things that they monitor. And so you're trying to figure out why you can't get approved or why your insurance rates are higher. It's because they are literally looking at old information on you that you can't even see anymore. And this, like I said, this information has been floating around on you since you began to operate as a consumer in commerce. I ordered a copy of my LexisNexis file last year, and it was over 100 pages long. It had information on there for old cars that have been long gone years ago, old VIN numbers, old insurance policies, old email addresses that I closed down and haven't used in years. It's a lot of old information, but it has your current information on there as well. So when it comes to enforcing your rights under this subchapter, the FCRA 1681, this applies to all of the CRAs. So any dispute process that you go through with the big three, transaction or TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, you can go through the same process with the smaller consumer reporting agencies because they're all responsible. So when it comes to attempting to enforce your rights or going after these people for a remedy, all of them are equally the same. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And you can actually go to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau website, and they actually have a list of all of the data furnishers and the consumer reporting agencies that's current as of 2022. So you can actually go on the website and look at this list. When you look at the list, it's going to tell you what type of information they specialize in collecting. It tells you what they do. So if you get denied for a job, you don't get the offer that you're looking for, there's a CRA that reports employment information on you, that reported how much money you made. Like, these CRAs are literally down to the detail of what they're reporting on you. Your life is out there. So, we just have to be very intentional about protecting our privacy. So I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, so yesterday, again, we spoke about the 4-day block and remove method in terms of you identifying things on your consumer report that is a result of identity theft, right? And so we basically spoke about the fact that no consent equals identity theft. So if you did not give consent to these companies, the companies that you do business with, to report your private non-public information, that is identity theft, because you did not provide explicit written or verbal permission for them to report this information. So we also spoke about the fact that most people look at identity theft as being someone stole your wallet, someone used your credit card without your permission. And that is also still true. But when it comes to consumer law, we have to look at it as a privacy issue, right? And there's people that's buying and selling and trading your information without your permission. They're making money off of you without your permission, and they have compiled a report on you that is supposed to represent who you are, but you did not give them permission to do that. So that, in essence, is the definition of identity theft. It doesn't just always have something to do with someone physically stealing something from you, like your driver's license or your credit card, right? So when we think about the 4-day block and remove method for the CRAs, we're virtually saying to the CRAs that, listen, I didn't give these companies to report any of the information that you all have on record. So because of that, because my rights are being violated, my privacy is being violated, I am demanding, because you're not asking, because these are your consumer rights. These are not privileges. You are demanding that they follow the law and block and remove any information that you have identified as being a result of identity theft, not later than 4 business days after the receipt of such information that you provided to them. Right. And so we went into what those requirements would look like. Appropriate proof of the identity of the consumer, which is your identification, right? Your driver's license or a passport. A copy of an identity theft report. Yesterday, we spoke about that you can go to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission website, and create an identity theft report and submit it to the CRA along with your identification. The identification of such information by the consumer. So how do you identify that information? You get a copy of your credit report, you pull out a pen and you pull out a highlighter and you go through your credit report with a fine-tooth comb and you highlight and identify those items that you know that you did not provide a specific written permission for them to report to your consumer report, right? Which is virtually everyone that you do business with, because you know that you didn't give these people permission and you know that they didn't give you separate documentation that is clear and conspicuous. So what do we mean by clear and conspicuous, right? Okay, so when you go to sign paperwork with a loan company, or you go, and I'm talking about face-to-face, or if you apply for an application over the phone and you get approved, or if you apply for something online and you get approved. When you go through the closing process for a loan, there's a bunch of paperwork that they have you to sign, right? And it's all jumbled together. They're like, oh, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here, and then you're done. What we mean by clear and conspicuous is a separate piece of paper that's not in the bundle that they hand to you or that they send to you in the form of an electronic disclosure that specifically says, here are your rights in terms of credit reporting. Here are your options in terms of opting out from credit reporting. I mean, it's clear as day. There's no confusion. You know exactly what it's for, and you are provided with clear instructions on how to exercise your right from not having these items reported on your credit. That is clear and conspicuous. When I have to dig through paperwork, piles of paperwork, or piles of electronic disclosures that they don't give you time to read in advance before you sign the paperwork, that's not clear and conspicuous, because that to me means that you took and hid that information inside of a packet of papers, or you put it in very, very little itty bitty small print on the disclosure that I signed, that it may have been in there, but because you didn't pull me aside and say, hey, Ms. Bush, here's your here's us informing you of your rights. Here's the piece of paper, or here's an electronic disclosure that is going to explicitly explain to you what your rights are and give you the option to opt out from having those items reported. That's not clear and conspicuous to me. To anyone, that is not clear and conspicuous, right? It says that it has to be clear and conspicuous. That's what the Gramm-Leach-Bailey Act is telling us in terms of us opting out from credit reporting, right? So we know that that never happens. And so I'm interested to see of anyone that has gone through any transaction, if you can tell me if that has literally ever happened to you before, where they pulled you aside, like, let me talk to you for a second. We just wanted to let you know that you have the ability to opt out from us reporting this on your credit report. Do you want to take advantage of that? Has it ever happened? 100% of the time, it has not happened. Okay, so that's what we went over yesterday. And so it's very important to know that although this system is set up in place and is running like a well-oiled machine, you do not have to consent to what it is that is being forced upon you just because it's what you're used to doing. You do have rights as a consumer, and you have the option to exercise those rights. So that's what this subchapter represents for you. When you go to these CRAs and you say, look, I didn't give them permission, they have to remove these items inside of 4 days. That's their responsibility under this law. All right, so that's what we covered yesterday. So I want to move on to, as you all can see, there's a lot of information here to cover, but I want to just make sure that I pull out the most important pieces of what we need to know in terms of exercising our rights. When you begin to study this information, it's very intense. So in order to get my point across, I want to make sure that I point certain things out to you. All right, disclosures of investigative report. Okay, this one is very important because it basically describes the process of what the CRA is supposed to do when you notify them of an error on your credit report, okay, consumer report. A person may not procure or cause to be prepared an investigative report on any consumer unless it is clearly and accurately disclosed to the consumer that an investigative consumer report, including information as to his character, general reputation, personal characteristics, and mode of living, whichever are applicable, may be made, and such disclosure is made in writing, mailed, or otherwise delivered to the consumer, not later than 3 days after the date on which the report was first requested. All right, so basically what this is saying here is that you have to be notified when a consumer report is being created about you, and you have to be notified that an investigative report about you is being requested. Okay, so when you go and apply for something, do they ever notify you that someone is going to pull your credit report? I know that you're notified by the company that your report is going to be pulled, but are you notified by the consumer reporting agency that they received a request to pull your credit? Ever? Think about it. Ever. When has the CRA ever notified you that they're going to furnish a report? They never do. They never do. They never do. Now, regarding an investigative report is what we spoke about on, what's today, Thursday? We spoke about that on day one, where we said that your consumer report is anything written or oral. And anytime that they go to investigate your consumer report, they have to conduct personal interviews with neighbors, friends, close associates, and people that have firsthand knowledge of the transaction that was completed. They have to have firsthand knowledge, right? And most of the time, you are the only one that can attest to any transaction that was completed. You are the only one that have firsthand knowledge of the information that was, or the account that you applied for, or the transaction that you did with the company, the person. We know that a person is defined as an individual or a company or a corporation, right? So this is basically telling you that you have to be notified of any and everything that's going on with your consumer report. That's just the way it is. There's no way around it. All right, so I want to get into civil liability for willful noncompliance, 1681N, and civil liability for negligent noncompliance. Now, this is where your remedy comes in and where you begin to enforce failure to comply, right? Because you're literally being violated all the time. And you have to know how to enforce your consumer rights. This is what lays it out. It lays out your monetary reward or damage, you can call it a damage, for being violated by these companies, right? So any person who willfully fails to comply with any requirement imposed under this subchapter with respect to any consumer is liable to that consumer in the amount equal to the sum of any actual damages sustained by a consumer as a result of the failure or damages not less than $100 and not more than $1,000. Or now, let me go back for a second because it says actual damages. It says actual damages. And then it says or. So anytime that you see or, it represents your right to choose which one you want. It says or. So what are actual damages? Let's talk about that for a second. Actual damages sustained by the consumer. Okay. Think about this for a second, right? If you have a derogatory item that's currently on your credit report, and you go and apply for $60,000 loan and you get denied due to a derogatory item that's on your credit report, that is an actual damage because you didn't get approved for the very thing that you went and applied for. Had that derogatory item not been reporting on your credit report, you would have gotten approved for the $60,000 loan. So this is what we're talking about, actual damage. That is a damage to you when you did not get approved for that $60,000 loan. That's your damage, right? It says any actual damage sustained by the consumer as a result, or damages of not less than $1,000 and not more than $1,000. So you have the right to choose. Are you going to go after them for the $1,000 or are you going to go after them for the actual damage? Right? All right, letter B, in the case of liability of the natural person for obtaining the consumer report under false pretenses or knowingly without permissible purpose, actual damages sustained by the consumer as a result of the failure or $1,000, whichever is greater. Now, we want to make sure that as a natural person, we do not sustain any liability under the FCRA. So when you begin to go after these companies for violations, you have to be able to properly define yourself and who you are in that transaction based on the situation. Because when you read these statutes, it clearly outlines who can take on the liability for that transaction, and you need to make sure that it is not you. Right? So if the subsection is stating that the natural person can potentially have a liability, we need to make sure that everything that we do is in good order and in honor so that we do not sustain any liability when going after these companies, because it can potentially happen if you fail to properly define yourself and if you fail to properly define the company that you're going up against. And that goes back to the definition, right? You have to be able to properly define yourself to ensure that the company takes the liability and not you. All right, so this is where your money is. Civil liability for willful noncompliance. That's where the money is. All right, now 1681-0, civil liability for negligent noncompliance. Any person who is negligent and failing to comply with any requirement imposed under the subchapter with respect to any consumer is liable to that consumer in the amount equal to the sum of any damages sustained by the consumer as a result of the failure, and in the case of any successful action to enforce any liability under this section, the cost of the action together with reasonable attorney's fees. Okay, so in the case of any successful action, what does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, so that means if you go up against the CRA, put in a dispute, and you get them to remove the very item that you're disputing for the reasons that you stated, that's considered a successful action because removal is an admission of guilt. So on a successful action, it's like, look, you removed this, so you admitted to liability, right? You then have the ability to enforce the liability. under this section, right? And then go after them for attorney's fees. Now, the thing of the matter is when you begin to go after these companies, there's two different ways. And I think we spoke about this a couple of days ago. There's either going to be court or there's going to be arbitration. And it's very important that any company that we do business with, we know what their process is in terms of settling disputes. And so that's when we have to get into the fine print of the terms and conditions and these agreements that we are signing, because it's going to tell you exactly how you need to go about settling disputes or resolving disputes. Right? So there may be attorney's fees, there may not. And you may be able to get your arbitration fees waived. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is you have to know what's going on in order to be able to enforce your consumer rights. You have to read the agreements. You have to be absolutely certain that when you begin your administrative remedy, that your paperwork is in good order, that you remain in honor, right? And that you are following the law to a T. Because like I said before, you don't want to have your claims dismissed on a technicality, right? Oh my goodness, it's the time just goes by so fast. Wow. The time just goes by so fast. So tomorrow we are going to get into the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and we're going to get into the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which is 15 USC 1692. This subsection here, whoo, boy. And I may just do another refresher tomorrow just so that we can close out the week on the FCRA. I think I'll do that. And then next week, we'll dive into the FDCPA, because this chapter here, you're going to want to watch these videos multiple times. So let me just take a look and see if there's anyone on here, if you guys have any questions, and if you've been watching. This is our third day together. It's March the 3rd, right? So all right, good deal. So you all just let me know if you have any questions. Definitely share out this broadcast. We are going to continue to dive deep into these consumer laws, because this is really your life. Everything that you do every single day is looked at as some sort of business transaction. It's not something that you can get away with. I can go deeper with it, but I'm not going to kill y'all today. I'm not going to go too deep throughout the month of March into this, into these topics, because it will literally take you down a rabbit hole and your brain will begin to spin. Your mind will begin to spin if you knew the level of fraud that is being committed against us. It's so deep, it's ridiculous. It is completely ridiculous. But anyway, so we covered a good portion, in the first 3 days of our time together. I'm excited to be able to share my understanding of the consumer laws. And I'm hoping that I'm able to provide some level of clarity to you in your journey and understanding what is going on out here, because it's very important that we know these things, because our rights are literally being violated every day. And this is important information that we need to teach our children, because when they go out here and begin to conduct business as adults, they need to know what's going on. And if we don't know, we can't inform them, and they're just going to fall into the same traps that we fell in when we first started using credit and, making money and buying houses and cars and all these things, right? So this is information that we have to pass on to the next generation. I am very adamant about the youth. It's so important that we educate the leaders of tomorrow, because we have to give them the tools that they need to change the world. So again, my name is Tamara T. Bush. I am going to go ahead and sign off, and I will see you all tomorrow at 7 p.m. Peace and blessings, everyone, and make it a great evening.